to tonight's event, Building a Legacy of Love, Thriving in the Sandwich Generation, an interview with author Christy Yates. We're very excited to have her here in the ACC studio talking to us about her book, which I have my copy here. My name is Simone Nizell. I'm the education coordinator at Del Oro Caregiver Resource Center, and we are just so pleased to be able to collaborate with ACC Senior Services once again to bring a local author who is going to talk to us about caregiving issues. So welcome, Christy.
Thank you, Simone. I'm very excited to be here. Thanks.
So wonderful having you. I'm going to take a moment to introduce you. And I'm pulling this bio from the book jacket, and the about the author section. So here we go. This is Christy Byrne Yates. She is a mother of 2 now adult children. She's an expert in navigating the challenges and opportunities in life and living in the sandwich generation, which we'll be talking about tonight. Special needs education and parenting. She's a licensed educational psychologist, writer, speaker, and coach. And specifically, she coaches sandwich generation parents to manage the chaos and overwhelm of raising kids while caring for aging parents so that they can show up powerfully and joyfully for themselves and their families. Additionally, she regularly produces content and workshops on topics such as self-care, special education, and parenting. She lives in Northern California with her cat and her husband and enjoys visits from her children whenever they come up. Again, we're so glad that you're here today.
Thank you so much.
Well, let's go ahead and we'll dive in. We're going to start with the basics here. My first question for you today is, what exactly is the sandwich generation? Could you give us a definition, any relevant statistics?
Yeah, absolutely. So it is kind of a weird term, right? Sandwich generation, right? It's not about making sandwiches. It's really, if you think about it, a sandwich is something where you have two pieces of bread, right? And then there's something squished in the middle. And that's really the parent we're talking about. And who are they squished between? They're raising children in their own home, and now tasked with, in some way, managing the care of an aging parent or loved one. So it could be any kind of combination. Classically, it's kids under the age of 18 living at home, or even college kids, right? But somebody living at home that you're still helping to parent, and then an aging parent, maybe living with you or living in care somewhere. But it could be someone raising grandchildren, right? We have all different kinds of combinations in families these days. The term was coined by a woman named Dorothy Miller back in the 80s. She was a social worker who was noticing that a lot of people in her clientele were in this place where they were suddenly, doing their parenting thing, and then now, I got to take care of mom and dad. What am I doing? And they were just really stretched and squeezed and pushed and pulled. So she called it the sandwich generation. So it's not my term, it's out there in the public domain, but that's really what it amounts to.
Right, thank you for that. That's an excellent definition. And this term is, I think, becoming more part of our vernacular. Yeah. More and more people are identifying, I think, with the sandwich generation, even though there are still some who don't know exactly what it means. So if what Christy just described to you sounds like your situation, you may be part of the sandwich generation.
And Simone, I'm going to tell you too, there's probably, by estimates, nearly 50% of Americans are in this place.
Wow.
Right? Pew Research did a study back in, I think it was as early as 2014, and they estimated about 47%. With COVID, we saw lots of families starting to pull back together, and there were many parents who maybe pulled their aging parents out of assisted living to be with them because they didn't want to be isolated from them. So multi-generational families are starting to be something that we're seeing more and more. But Also with economic downturn, we see more families having to pull together, and of those nearly 50% of Americans, they're also contributing financially, not just socially, emotionally to their parents, but they're having to help their parents financially because savings aren't what they used to be, pensions aren't what they used to be.
Right.
So there's a whole lot that goes into this.
And of course, we now have inflation to contend with.
Yes.
And there's a lot of monetary considerations
Right.
in caregiving and just the world that we live in now. And so I know you have a whole section of your book that's devoted to money matters and the legacy of love, which I really appreciated because that's often a question that caregivers have about the financial aspects. But we'll kind of circle back there a little later on. I did want to ask you a little bit about your story to frame our conversation. And each chapter of the book actually includes a section called My Story, where you dive into kind of how what you're talking about in terms of this legacy of love applied to your caregiving journey, which I really appreciated. What details do you think would be most helpful for understanding the reason why you wrote this book?
Absolutely. That's a great question. Thank you. You know, I was working full-time as a school psychologist. My kids were in middle school and high school. We had a great setup. My parents lived about 5 minutes up the road. They were very involved with my husband and I raising our kids. I had the best of everything, right? I was really, really privileged, and I know that. I was really privileged. My parents had, you know, saved well. They were Depression era folks. I mean, they didn't buy something new unless they needed to. There was none of this, you know, upgrading or whatever. They had taken care of their parents too, each of them in different ways. So they had kind of an idea of what might be happening as they got older. So they took the opportunity to form a trust for money they had inherited from their parents and money they'd earned. My mother had been a teacher for 20 some odd years. My dad was a salesman. I grew up in Ohio. They retired in California because my mother was a Californian, and that was the deal when she got married. It was like,
That makes sense.
I will go raise our kids in Ohio, but we're retiring in California. And so they kind of had an idea. And that's really why I called the book A Legacy of Love, because I learned so much from them about what it could be like. But it was still hard. So a lot of the stories that I tell are things where I had to make choices between, you know, what my parents might need me, but my kids needed me too. And what was I to do? You know, how did I do that? And I had to really stop at times to reflect on how was, you know, the way I was raised, and and the other piece in all of this is that both of my parents had significant health issues at the end of their life. As I said, they did a lot with us, and our kids benefited from knowing them and were close to them. But my mother was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and my dad had vascular dementia. He'd had a stroke. Before they retired, he'd had a stroke, and then a number of TIAs, and on top of that, some kidney issues. So, you know, I was dealing with parents who needed a lot of help towards the end of their life, and I had to get involved. So that's why I tell these different stories, because I had to think through, God, you know, I can't ask Mom this anymore. I can't ask Dad this anymore. They don't have the ability to tell me what they want in this situation. But it was, you know, I think I opened the book with a story about my son graduating high school and going off to college. At the same time, my mom was, we determined that she had this particular condition. She had a recurrence of cancer. And I was supposed to fly out in 3 days with my son to take him to college. And what do I do? Do I stay with my mom and miss this milestone with my son? You know, and I really had to just chew on that for a while and cry and talk to people and kind of figure out where my heart led me. But those are the kinds of choices that come up a lot of times in the sandwich generation.
Right. Thank you for sharing that. So I'm glad that you brought us to that anecdote too. That was particularly poignant. Your children, correct me if I'm wrong, were adolescents when you kind of began your caregiving journey, which, as we all know, adolescence is its own, very complex and an exciting time of life. And for parents, it requires so much energy and investment. So I'm sure you felt that squeeze that we hear as associated with the sandwich generation. I did want to circle back. It sounds like teaching runs in your blood. Your mom was a teacher, and you actually started your career in education. How has your educational background informed your caregiving experience and now the work that you do with caregivers?
Yeah, that's a great question. I was most recently a school psychologist, and then in California you can be a licensed educational psychologist. I was that as well, but I worked for about 20 years in education as a special education teacher and then as a school psychologist. And I think it informed my work a lot with my parents, especially the piece about being a school psychologist, because a school psychologist oftentimes is trying to determine whether a student has a disability under certain federal regulations, but it's a lot of taking a look at cognitive development, adaptive skills, living skills, learning. And this is the kind of thing that happens as people age. They start to lose the ability to do certain things. And so it's called something else in senior care, right? I'm not a gerontologist, but those skills that people start to lose, the ability to dress themselves or to cook or to take care of things. And then with dementia and Alzheimer's, that is then compromised even more. So I say all that, but I got to tell you, Simone, there were plenty of times when I was in complete denial about my parents' needs. And that was really hard for me, kind of, when I woke up mentally and thought, how did I miss that? And I missed it because I'm human and I loved my parents, and I didn't want to see this. And that's a really normal thing for parents in the sandwich generation to overlook. Sometimes we think our parents can do more than they really can. And the opposite is true. Sometimes we think they can't do anything and they can do a whole lot. And so we have to really walk that balance of what do we really know and how are we being accurate. So I think it informed me a lot, and even more so in hindsight.
It's interesting because I feel like that is the struggle of most teachers and educators, is walking that balance of how much can I push a student, what can they really do, reflecting on my limitations as a person and know what I know and I just can't know, and then still trying to provide the best, care and service to this individual. And it is such a tightrope. I feel like as educators often, just don't get enough credit for how much they have to balance. And similarly, caregivers don't get as much credit as they deserve. One of the things I really enjoyed reading in your book was that you indicated that caregivers can approach caregiving with a case manager kind of attitude. And I was wondering if you could elaborate a little bit on this whole case manager attitude. I'd never heard it put like that before. I thought that was really clever.
Well, so I'd had years as a school psychologist, and even prior to that had worked in a lot of mental health organizations. So case management is really, you've got the person you're concerned about, but there are other aspects, there are all these different aspects to their life, right? And a case manager is going to try and understand how they're doing in all these different parts of their life, right? So a student, it might be academically, social, emotionally, physically. Can they manage kind of the physical day-to-day stuff? And we do that with our aging parents too. There's all these different things, and then there's with our parents, it's money. How's their bank account? Do they have everything going? What do they got? And the case management approach is knowing that it is kind of having the mentality of You don't have to be in charge of everything. You don't have to even be skilled in all these areas, but you want to know, you want to find people who are, that you can consult, right? So it's talking to your parents early enough about what happens when you can't manage your money, mom and dad. How are we going to do that? What are we going to do? And being able to talk to a financial planner if that's what you can do, or even just having the opportunity legally to talk to the bank if you need to. Talking to the doctor. Which doctors do you need to talk to? Sometimes as people age, they have way more than one. You know, they might have a cardiologist, they might have a kidney doctor, they might.
Right.
And so the case management approach is knowing you don't have to know all these things and be skilled, but you might need to get that information to help you help them, because your parents can get lost in that shuffle.
Yeah.
So that was the way I thought about it, and the thing is that we all have lots of skills and talents that we can roll into this. You know, there are a lot of people that have better abilities than I do about organizing things. I look at some moms that have home-based businesses, or even they're just involved in their kids' school, and they can shuffle all kinds of things. And you can take that skill set and put it to play also. So you don't have to become a gerontologist or a psychologist to be able to serve and help and support. It's just knowing that I can ask these people for that information. The step you might have to take is to get permission from your parents.
Right.
And siblings, and kind of work out through all those things, right? So it's a lot, but it's that kind of getting the information you need to know to make good decisions.
I think what I liked most about the case management approach is that I hear so often from caregivers that they, in the beginning, they want to do everything. Like, this is my person. I'm the only person who knows how to take care of my mom, my dad, my spouse, etc. But then there's a turning point, especially with these progressive illnesses, things like Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, ALS, anything that's a slow decline over time. There's a point at which the caregiver starts to realize, oh my gosh, I can't do this.
Right.
And the situation is changing in real time. So what I knew before doesn't apply now. And so when we talk about case management, you're sort of suggesting a way of delegating that's strategic, which I think caregivers need to know and need to know about and be comfortable with. The hard part, the hurdle, at least for me, when I was caregiving for my mom, was just getting to that point of realizing I can't do this all by myself.
Right, exactly.
And just accepting that.
Yeah, yes, absolutely. You can't. And for me, I think it's about building a team. It's building a team to be able to help you. It's taking a load off of you, but also that you also feel some faith in what you are doing with your parents. And the same can be said for your kids, right? You trust a pediatrician that you work with. You have to work with your children's school if they're in school, and if they're homeschooled, there's still some entity that you have to interface with. And it could be sports teams or what have you. And you've got to have this team that you trust, because you can't do it all. And it's also good for our kids to interact with other people. It's a social skill. And so we're just kind of pulling all those ends together.
Yeah. As you were talking, I was just thinking about that adage, you know, it takes a village.
Oh, absolutely.
And people scoff when they hear it now because it's so cliche, but, you know, I've seen it with parents of children, especially young children. They need help. Like, it's hard to just do it all by yourself. And then the same applies on the other end of the of human development as well. So my next question is kind of taking a look at our younger members of society, our kids. So how would you recommend that sandwich generation parents engage their children in the caregiving journey? In your book, you do a great job of talking about how kids know what's up. Like, you can't hide things from them. They may not know exactly how to articulate what's happening, but they know when something
Yeah,
is
yeah.
different. So how do we get kids involved in a meaningful way and a developmentally appropriate way?
Yeah, that's so important. I always say kids are always learning. We're not always we're not always clear on what we're teaching them because sometimes we're not teaching them good things. And we don't do that because we're bad or stupid. We do that because we're human and we're living our life too, and our emotions are sometimes stretched. So what I mean by all of that is that your kids are going to know something's going on, especially if you're stressed out. Your kids are going to know you're stressed out. They might not know what it is, and unfortunately, sometimes kids misinterpret and they think, especially younger kids, they might think, well, this is me, I did it. So starting to have conversations with kids in a developmentally appropriate way might be at the dinner table, or a great time to talk to kids is honestly, especially teenagers, is in the car. And you know what's interesting? There's a lot of research into this too. You know, your teenager's sitting in the seat next to you or even behind you, that minimal eye contact is actually a safe space for them, right? You're not just kind of drilling into them. And so having that conversation, talking about what's going on, and here's what's going on with me right now. I'm really stressed out about grandma and grandpa, or your uncle, or your whoever I'm caring for, your father, your mother. Especially with tweens and teens, you can kind of really be specific about what's going on. With younger kids, it might be helping them to understand, you know, right now, honey, I'm upset, I'm a little stressed out. Can you think of a time when you were stressed out, and how'd that feel in your body? What did you do? Remember how I helped you do such and such? Well, you know, right now I need your help with some of these things. It's just helping them to know that you're human, and you might be upset, but you're taking care of yourself. That's what they need to hear from you, is that you're doing what you need to do. And if I'm upset, or if you see me crying, it doesn't mean you did anything. I'm just having a moment where I'm sad, but I know I'll get through it. Just like when you got sad, you got through it, and I'm here to help you. So it's kind of helping them to know that this is normal and natural. Yeah. I also have, one great resource I have for folks is, I wish I'd written this down for you, but it's alzauthors.com.
Okay.
So ALZAUTHOURS. So Al's from Alzheimer's, and authors, one word, .com. And there are there's over 300 authors there, and there's a whole section just for teens and children. And it talks specifically about how to talk about dementia and Alzheimer's, but it's a great book. There are a number of great books that can just help you think about how to talk age appropriately to different kids about different things.
That's awesome.
So that's a great way to do it with kids. Reading a book with kids is a great way to start a conversation. But
yeah, it sounds like having the conversation with your kids is really what's critical. And when we talk about engaging kids in the caregiving journey, we're not talking about like delegating specific tasks necessarily, though it's true that, you know, older kids may want to help.
Right, absolutely.
And what's your advice for parents who, maybe at their wit's end with regards to all of their caregiving responsibilities? How might they involve older kids in a way that's appropriate and meaningful for the children?
Right, yeah. And there are different ways to involve kids at different ages too. I think it's structuring that time, right? So having a set group, or not a set, but some specific tasks that they can do together. It might be a game they could play. It could be looking through photo books or something to engage. And know that there's kind of a short amount of time. For older kids, I mean, obviously, right, like you said, you're not going to be having your 12-year-old changing, any kind of medical devices or anything like that.
Yeah.
But they could be there to read with someone. It could be a time to help with feeding, or finding other activities that a parent, an aging person might need help with. It could be making sure they've got their television on the right channel, and talking to them about what's going on in the news or the game show they watch together or something like that. But finding some activities that are pretty neutral and helpful. But there's also things like teaching them how to help grandma out of the car and into the wheelchair. Like what's a safe way to do that?
Right.
You're going to model that with them. You're going to make sure they know, here's what you need to look for, here's what. Obviously something that they're going to be comfortable with. And if a child says, I can't do that, I think then you need to say, okay,
yeah,
you can't do that. We wouldn't force our kids need to have their boundaries too.
Yes.
And that's one of the things we need to teach kids as parents is no means no, and we have to honor that. So I wouldn't force a child to kiss someone goodnight if they're not comfortable doing it, but there might be another thing. Could there be a wave from the doorway? Could there be, some other way you can let grandma know you're here and I love you, whatever it is.
I like
so
that.
Find those different ways.
I mean, and that goes hand in hand with this whole idea that, our kids are constantly learning.
Yes.
And one of the things that I've sort of reflected on since caring for my mom is that there was no training as a young person at all for that. And yet with the sandwich generation, there's this interesting opportunity where parents can model in real time the fact that caregiving is a reality of life for their kids. They can sort of provide training for them in a lot of ways. And again, I'm not saying, I really appreciated that you said we're not going to make children do anything that feels uncomfortable or is not developmentally appropriate, but just to know that like aging is a part of life.
Right.
That, our mobility changes as we age. We need more assistance and and to normalize that.
Right.
I didn't see any of that as a child. And so I like that we can, your book sort of highlights that this is an opportunity, even though it's hard to be squeezed, it's an opportunity for us to really model for kids.
Right.
How to caregive. So that actually leads me to the next question. You talk about grief in your book, and you mention how it particularly affects sandwich generation caregivers. And so I'm just wondering if you could talk to us a little bit about what kind of grief affects sandwich generation caregivers and what that experience is like.
Sure. And grief is, again, something that's normal and natural. It's a human emotion that all of us will experience on some level. I think what's really poignant with sandwich generation folks, I certainly experience this, and I hear this from people I work with, is times where you're with your kids, listen, I love my kids, but there were times they made me crazy, right? So you might be feeling crazy and overwhelmed with your kids, but it's a different kind of frustration than what's happening with your parents, right? You sort of know what your kids are going to be up to. We've heard developmental milestones for our kids for years, right? And we've all been through that. We were all teenagers once. We all had our hearts broken once. We all had to get our first job. So we kind of know what they're going through. But to my knowledge, none of us have, passed away and come back. Right. So we don't know what our parents are feeling. So there's, this disconnect here. The other thing is our kids they're like our sunshine and our joy. It's kind of, they're our sunrise. And our hearts are filled with joy for all of their accomplishments and even tears when they're struggling, right? And our parents sort of represent the sunset of the whole lifespan, right? And that's melancholy. It's hard. We don't know. We don't know what's at the end here. So I think that just that jumble of emotions all the time can be really overwhelming, to feel immense joy and immense grief all at the same time. And the grief that you sometimes feel as you're watching someone decline is what's called anticipatory grief. And I actually didn't call it that in the book because I've only, in the last year since I've published, really dug into grief more. And this is a very real thing that you your parent hasn't passed away yet, but you know it's coming. You know where you're going. And every day there may be decline, or there may be a huge drop in ability. And all of those things just kind of choke us up at times, and we start to see, oh, mom can't feed herself by herself anymore. She can't hold a spoon. Dad needs to go from the walker to the wheelchair now. And these little declines just, they show us that there's more coming, and it's frightening and it's sad, and we don't want to see them go. Right. So living with that low level of grief all the time that can't really be resolved until they do die is a very difficult thing to carry.
Yeah. So, I mean, along those lines, and again, thinking about how our children are constantly watching, they're learning. How do we talk to our kids about grief,
right,
and decline?
Right. And I wish I could tell you that I'm a complete expert on this, but I'm learning all the time. I do really believe in having conversations and talking about things as a normal part of the life cycle, right? So I think being able to, again, let kids know, and after about, certainly our little kids below age 4, I mean, they're not really cognizant of that, right? That's not where they're at. Their world exists like right here, and it's food and warmth and comfort and fun. And then as we get older, we start to notice that there's another world out there. There's other people, and so as your kids start to become aware of that, they might become more sensitive to what's going on. I think with grief, it's really important to talk about what you're feeling, but also share what you're doing to try and get through that. So developing healthy habits. And so when I say opportunities in the book, this might be an opportunity to help your family develop healthy practices for normal upsets, right? We all face them. But how do we face them together, and how can we support each other through those times? It might be, if you're a faith-based community, attached to a faith-based community, it's becoming more involved in that. It might be sort of a wellness approach. We're going to get exercise and sunshine, and we're going to eat healthy, and we're going to take time for slowing things down. Maybe we're not going to have the news on 24/7. I mean, there are things we can do. Right. So I think all of those things are ways that our kids then are learning from us, and I think that helps us through those grief processes. But life is tough sometimes, and that's one of our jobs, I believe, as parents, is to help our kids know how to navigate through those tough times, because if we shelter them all the way when they're 18 and 21 and they're on their way, if they've never dealt with anything, then they might not, it might be even harder. We can talk sometimes about, in terms of death, we can talk about maybe pets we've had, or other people in their lives that they know who've lost someone. So take the time to talk about it.
Thank you for that. I'm going to switch gears a little bit and move from grief to gifts. At the end of your book, you state, one of the best gifts my parents gave me was planning for the end of their lives. How was this a gift for you?
So it was a gift because my parents, as I said, they had both cared on some level for their aging parent. And like I said, they were Depression era folks who believed in saving everything and taking care of their money. And they weren't, millionaires. They took care of their money well, and so that my sister and my brother and I would not have to do that. And they were very clear from the get-go that they were not going to live with any of us. So they had a long-term health care plan, the type of which doesn't exist anymore, thank goodness, because it was a little strict. But because it only paid for assisted living, it didn't pay for in-home care, which is a really great option for many people. But so they had those things laid out. They had a trust for their money. They had filled out end of life and and end-of-life wishes. I knew that they both wanted to be cremated. My dad had served in the military, so he wanted to be buried at the National Cemetery. I didn't have to do much of figuring out all these last-minute pieces, right? It was all laid out for me, and that was the gift, because then I could just be there for them. I could hold their hand. I could take them out to dinner, join them at dinner at the assisted living facility. I didn't have to think, what did they want? What did they want? Oh my gosh, what do I do? It was all laid out for me. And so at the time when my husband and I started doing a lot of work to take care of my parents, we both looked at each other and said, we don't have any of these things. We need to get some of these things. And, and we did. We went to the same attorney who had done some of their work and developed our trust. And we wrote, we were healthy young adults, but we filled out paperwork about what we wanted to have happen, and who would take our kids if we were to pass away. So it just, to me, that felt like such a gift of love from my parents that I could pass on to my kids, that they know what we want, and they can just be there to be comforting rather than having to figure everything else out. It gets to be a scurry at the end, and it's nice to not have to think about all those things.
Yeah, and just to reiterate what you were saying, it's nice to just be a daughter again.
Yeah.
Not, if everything's sort of set up and there's one less thing to anticipate or have to do. I can hold my mom's hand and we can watch a movie together. We can eat dinner together. And I just want to say one more thing. Please.
I'm going to preach here for a little bit, but I really feel like it's so important to have a lot of these conversations well before you need them. So if you're 30 and you're just starting on your family, or you're 40 and your parents are like, tennis, golf, running around the world, having a great time, seeing your parents, that's great. That'd be a great time to make sure because when you get to a certain point, you can't have those conversations anymore. And you're making decisions from a place of intense pain points rather than, oh, this is kind of what I want. And just because you say it at 50 doesn't mean at 80 you can't change your mind.
Right.
Because you can. But maybe later in life is not the first time to have that conversation with your family. Right. So that's my
plug.
I
appreciate that. No, I think people need to hear that, and they need to hear the part that they can change their mind. It's not written in stone, but if it's written down somewhere, at least there's something to work from. Your book is called A Legacy of Love, and so many people hear the word legacy and they immediately go to the monetary piece of things, right? How wealth is passed down through families. But legacy, as you describe it in the book, has to do with a lot more than just the monetary aspects. Like, money is one chapter in this book. There's all these other dimensions that we need to look at. I actually wanted to talk a little bit about the legacies that you outlined. You have a really great graphic that you include in the book that shows different kinds of legacies that we can leave. And I just appreciated this just because I love graphics and charts. Obviously your emphasis is on the legacy of love, but can you explain some of the other legacies we can leave besides a legacy of love? And then we'll get to that, obviously.
So I started thinking about all of this after my parents had passed away. And one of the things that occurred for me was people were kind of coming out of the woodwork saying to me, oh, Christy, I'm in your shoes now. What did you do about this? And what did you do about that? And I thought, oh my gosh, there's not a lot out there. So I'm gonna just start writing some thoughts down. I had joined some online support groups for sandwich generation folks. And I started to just, because I'm a data geek, right? And I'm an educator.
Same.
This is why I love talking to you. But I started to sort of chart out, what are the biggest pain points people are facing? And kind of two things showed up. One is people feel overwhelmed with how much they have to do. They just don't feel support. So it's that emotional bandwidth that they are lacking. I don't feel support. I'm going a little bit crazy here. And then the other is I don't know what to do. So it's a lack of knowledge. I don't know exactly what to do about this situation. I don't know what Alzheimer's is. I don't know what ALS is. Oh my gosh, I'm overwhelmed. So when you look at that, you can start to see that if you don't have the kind of support you need, either to know how to learn what you need to know or who to ask, because who has time to become a physical therapist on top of everything they're doing, right? And no one's going to go to medical school and learn how to do all these things just because they have to take care of their parents. So, so it's finding out who to ask, you know, finding places like Delaware or ACC or some other service centers that can help you with all of this, because they're out there. So that's a knowledge thing that we can shore up. And then the other piece is learning how to take care of ourselves. It might be setting boundaries. But the legacy of love that I talk about and the different legacies, if we can see the graphic again, maybe I can, oh, here we go. So a legacy of love is kind of where your family, your kids are learning that compassion and caring are what love is. I see compassion as empathy in action. Children are naturally empathetic. They want to help each other. I want to help, I want to help. And then that just keeps going. And so if we can take that and say, wow, that's great, you want to help. How do we do that? So empathy in action is compassion. In a legacy of love, children learn that accepting people and contributing what you can is valued. Even if it's just, I'm going to turn the television on for grandma. And then you have consistent and congruent systems, right? You have systems in place. You have maybe, you know, that village that you're talking about. You have people that can help you with your kids and your family. But if you are lacking a lot of these things, you might be in a place of chaos, right? What your children are learning is that elder care is overwhelming. It's just horrible, right? It's harmful to others, you know, it's just, I saw my mom just disintegrate by taking care of everybody. It was horrible. I'll never have kids. I'll never be old, you know, these things. Most people suffer, and there are very few systems in place to help them. Another one is resentment, right? If you have a lot of stress, but you know what you need to do, you're a little overwhelmed, you have resentment, like, why am I doing all of it? Who else is there to help me? If you have siblings, it might be, who else is chipping in right now? And so you have some resentment because you know all the stuff you have to do, but you don't have enough support. On the other hand, you might be somebody who has no idea what to do, but you have some support, and you just feel overwhelmed because elder care is complicated. You feel powerless, and you can often feel like everything's incongruent. Sometimes this works, sometimes that doesn't work, but you haven't really pulled it all together. So I just think that it's just a way of looking at, can you take a minute to figure out your support systems? Who's there for you? Do you need to fix those? Maybe you need to work on relationships. Maybe you need to say no. And then, do you know where to look for knowledge and support for the actual things? Does that make sense?
No,
Okay.
that makes so much sense. And can we put the graphic up just one more time, just so our viewers can see again? I think what I appreciate so much about this is that it's just a good reminder that this idea of legacy is a little bit bigger than what we often reduce it to when we think about transference of wealth.
Right.
Because again, we have this opportunity to teach our children what the aging process can be and what it can look like and what it can mean for different generations within a household and across, you know, even outside of the household, within the community. And you know what you were saying about how for some there's this legacy of chaos. I hear from so many people, you know, this sort of fear, people my age, fear of growing older because of negative experiences that they that were either reported to them or that they witnessed with their own parents providing care for grandparents. And whatnot. So there is this like intergenerational exchange, whether we know it's happening or not,
Right.
where you're leaving, you know, the experience of what it means to be a caregiver. You're impressing that upon younger people, and what do you want that to look like? And it sounds like, you know, just kind of by laying it out for us here, like like the good news is that we have some choice as to how we want that to look like. In the same way that we have choice over, you know, where our money and assets go, and also, you know, what we want to have happen at end of life, if we take the time to think about it, have choice about what we want our kids to take away from our experience of caregiving.
Yeah, and it's a continuum, right? The knowledge and the stress, they're a continuum. I was everywhere. There were times that I was absolutely leaving a chaos legacy to my kids.
All over the matrix.
And then I might be like, and there were times I was resentful, and there were times I felt like, just really obligated. And I hope that I eventually have left my kids with a sense of, we can get through this. I think I did okay, because they're both, you know, graduated from college and still call us, and not just ask for money. So that's really wonderful.
There you go.
So I think they have gotten that legacy of love, and they appreciated knowing my parents and being able to care for them a little bit. So so don't feel disheartened if you see yourself as being in a place of chaos. You can move out of that. There's a way to do it.
I think that's really important. It's not that like we're all gonna just, you know, stay in that upper quadrant of a legacy of love all the time. Caregiving is a journey, like, and you're gonna have ups and downs. But overall, like, it's exciting to know that there is an overall kind of feeling about caregiving that you can leave to your children too. Like, in the end, you know, I loved your grandma, like, and it was a privilege to be with her. I loved your grandfather, like, it was my honor to take care of him versus, you know, this ruined our relationship or this tore the family apart. So I just appreciate that the book does some good work here, sort of expanding our idea of legacy. I wanted to sort of end our conversation today by thinking about, you know, advice. Well, maybe advice is the wrong word, but I guess I just want to pick your brain a little bit. What do you think that sandwich generation caregivers need to know most? What do you really want to impress upon people who are, you know, in this situation?
Absolutely. Number one, you're not alone. There are so many people that are in this place and time. And it's okay to feel overwhelmed. But if asking for help is hard, that'd be the first thing I'd say is you can't do it alone. Or if you choose to do it alone, it might be harder, and you're not alone. There are people who will help you. There are great organizations and services, but there are other people who are going through this time period too. So sharing that information and talking to folks. With respect to your own children, if your children are struggling, and that's one of the other things that I think is really important, thinking about this, is that this can be hard for kids. So going back to that case manager thing, and even pulling in a little bit about the grief, talk to your kids' support systems. It might be that if you're really struggling, your child might really be struggling, and if they're, you know, K through 12, it might be a time to reach out to school staff if they're in schools. But there may be other sources that can provide support for your child too. And so reach out to those folks to let them know what's going on so that your child can get the support they need. And then you can get the support you need, but you're not alone, and there are people who can help you. I didn't know that so many things existed. And if I had to go through this again, I would, oh my gosh, I'd be reaching out to so many places for support, and that's my number one thing.
So as a kind of a complement to that, how can people within the village or the community of the sandwich generation caregiver, how can they best support that individual? as they're feeling the squeeze sometimes and they're moving around that matrix, you know?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think it's an interesting thing, an interesting dynamic as I'm exploring this so much more is that, like I said, there are more instances of multi-generational families. But, you know, in many cultures, the term sandwich generation wouldn't even apply, right? Because there are many cultures that elders live with us, that of course grandma comes to live with us. And so we can learn a lot from sharing information and learning from other cultures and starting to see how, wow, what can we do? Where is there a place where I can learn and share? So it might be also looking at through a multicultural lens, and that might be something that agencies can look at a little bit as well. Because I think that we're getting to a place where, as spread out as we are as humans now, there are ways that we can be closer. I also feel like some of the technology, all the things that were so horrible about the pandemic, the one thing that kind of came up is that you don't actually have to leave home to go get information and consult with somebody. You could actually have a video learning experience with other people and find support and community. So I think that there's so many opportunities that are kind of coming open to us. But I think it's important also for agencies then to, this is fantastic that you're having a learning opportunity right now and even more of those. And you might not be able to listen to them real time, but hey, it's on YouTube. You know what? The first time I got a break half the time was 11 o'clock after my kids went to bed. And then and that's when I could kind of Google, what do I need to know about this or something? And it's there for us now. So I think that information source is building up and we can really use that. So how can we make that available to people earlier and just with a click of a mouse?
Yeah,
you know?
And yes, multicultural lens, I agree with that. Multimodal, making it as accessible as possible. One of the things that, I'll just make a quick plug here, but
please.
One of the things that's really exciting at Del Oro is that we're working alongside our sister agencies. We're part of a network of caregiver resource centers across the state of California, and we've started sharing education with one another, and we've been able to share this education in different languages. So
brilliant.
we understand that, you know, really the diversity within our state is a strength, first of all, but we need to leverage that too in supporting people with all types of caregiving experiences, because there's not one size fits all.
Exactly.
Not at all. Well, with that, we have a couple of minutes, and I think we have time to take one or two questions from the audience as they've come in. And so I'm just going to take a beat to see if there are any questions from audience members that we can pass along to Christy. And while we're waiting for the questions to queue, I do want to just thank you so much for your time today. It's been so fun talking to you. And I really enjoyed reading this book. Like, again, so accessible, like just a joy to read. And maybe it's the educator in me that like all my spidey senses were tingling, but I really enjoyed it. And I, you know, nerd that I am, I annotated it to use my sticky notes.
So it's available on Amazon, and I want you to know too that there's an ebook version, a paperback, and it's on Audible, because that's the other thing that sandwich generation people don't have is time to read. So when you're in the car or you're taking that one walk you need every day, there you go.
You can still listen to it. Yeah. Oh my goodness, that's wonderful news. Yes, it's definitely worth another read. I feel like I'm going to go through this again. There are resources in the back as well. And I think one of the resources that you mentioned earlier, Alt's Authors, is in the back of the book. Yeah. So if you're forming your community, or you need a place to begin your search about what kind of resources you want to start to build as a case manager, caregiver, this has some good resources for you as well. It looks like we may not have any. Oh, do we have audience questions? I don't know. It's a mystery. We do not have any audience questions. I'm so sorry for the suspense. But we are at the end of our time together. So I just, again, want to thank you so much, Christy.
Sure.
And before we go, do you want to share with our audience members ways that they can maybe learn more about you,
Sure.
about the book?
So I have a pretty easy website to remember. It's ChristyYates.com. So it's ChristyYates.com. So just ChristyYates.com. And on there you can find different links to things I have to offer. There's resources there. I'm on different podcasts from time to time. And then there are a lot of the links to YouTube, and I have some videos there. I do have some meditations and guided imagery and things like that that can help you too. So that's where you'd find me.
That's wonderful. And I'll end by letting you know as well that Del Oro Caregiver Resource Center is a resource available to unpaid family caregivers in the greater Sacramento region. We serve 13 counties in what are considered, or what's considered the gold country. So if you are in need of support services, things like counseling, respite, legal and financial consultation, we can be part of your village and part of this whole case management approach that you take to caregiving. We're so glad to have had the chance to talk to Christy this evening, and we are so grateful to ACC Senior Services for making this conversation available to all of our clients and beyond in our region.
Thank you.
Thank you.